Hi everyone, my name is Oksana and today I'm going to share with you my way of solving one of the issues in GitLab, which is trigger webhook on delete release event. Let's get started. From the description of this issue, we can understand that there is functionality that allows user to manage releases. Specifically, user can create, update, and delete release. We also see that there is release webhook, which is being triggered on two events, release creation and release update. The ask of this issue is to trigger this webhook on one more event, which is delete release, so that they can monitor and audit the whole release lifecycle. So to start work on this, we need to understand what is a release and what is a webhook in GitLab. To find this out, there are two documentation pages. One is for releases and one is for webhooks. So let's start with releases. It says that in GitLab, release enables you to create a snapshot of your project for your users. And how can we create these releases? Here is create release section, and we see that there are a few ways how can we do it. Let's choose the second one, where we have the steps we can follow in UI to create a release. So we need to find our project, then go to deploy, releases, select new release, and then provide all needed information and select create release. Let's try to do it in our local GitLab instance. I have GDK running, and let's select this project where I am an owner. Let's go to deploy. Here we have releases. We see that there are already two releases in here, and let's try to create new one. Let's select tag, provide release title, and if we scroll down, we see create release and cancel buttons. Let's click create release. We see it's successfully created. Now we can edit this release. Let's go and try to update something, update, and put in here some text. Now we see three buttons: save changes, delete, and cancel. Let's try to save this. Okay, so our changes are reflected in the UI here and here. Let's go back and try to delete this release. Okay, let's confirm, and release is deleted. Great, so now we know how to create release, how to update release, and how to delete release. Now let's find out about webhooks. So what is webhook? Webhooks in web development are user-defined HTTP callbacks, and those callbacks are triggered by some events. For example, here is it's saying event of pushing code to repository or posting a comment on an issue. In our case, we will work with such events as release creation and release update. When any of these events occurs, the application makes HTTP request to the URL which is configured for specific webhook. So let's find out how can we configure webhook. Here in this page, there is configure webhook in GitLab section, and we see steps that we need to follow in UI to configure a webhook. So we need to have our project, then select settings, webhook, select add new webhook. Here we need to provide a URL that our application will make HTTP request to. Then provide additional information and select add webhook. So let's try to do this in our GitLab instance. We have our project and we need to go to settings, and here we have webhooks. We see that there is no webhook enabled so far. Let's go and add one. We have a URL field where we need to provide URL that our application will make a request to when event will appear. If you scroll down a bit, here we have trigger section with a list of events that can trigger this webhook, and we need to find something related to releases. If we look through the list, here at the bottom we have releases events, and a hint text says release is created or updated. So we definitely need this one, and we don't need this verification. So what can we put in this URL? How can we test that this webhook will be triggered once release is created or updated? We can go back to documentation, and there is section test webhook. It says that once you created webhook, there is a test button that allows you to simulate the behavior and trigger the webhook. And another way is to use public webhook testing tools. Here we see that they suggest 3 of such tools, and I used Webhook site. This is how it looks like. Here you can see requests that were received by this website, and the URL that we need to provide in this field is at the top of the page, this one. So we just need to copy and paste it in this field. So let's try to create webhook with this URL. Click add webhook. Here we see this test button. We can try to click and select our releases event and see if the request will come through to this site. Let's try to hit releases events, and here we see that we received one request. We see that it's a new one, and here we see a payload that is sent by our application to this URL. Okay, now let's verify this webhook in a way when the release is created and updated. So we need to go back to releases page. Okay, and let's try to create one. Let's select this tag, provide title, and create release. And let's watch out this tab. Okay, so we see that we received a request from our application. And let's try to update this release. Update and save changes. Okay, so we see that one more request is sent to this website. And if we go to delete this release, we see that nothing happens. We don't see any new requests in here, and this is what we need to implement. We need to do changes in order to trigger this webhook when the release is deleted. Now it's time to take a look at the code. If we go back to new release page, we know that webhook fires as soon as we click create release button. And when we click on this button, a request that contains data from this form is sent to the backend. We need to know that GitLab is Ruby on Rails application, and some of GitLab pages are built using Rails Vue templates, and also there are pages that are built in Vue.js. And a request that is sent from frontend to backend can be processed by Rails controller action, or it can be sent to GraphQL API endpoint. So we need to figure out whether this page is Vue.js component or not, and then what is the endpoint that handles requests from this page. Let's inspect this page with the help of browser extension, which is called View. Okay, and here at the bottom we see components that are used in this page. Let's try to select this whole form and see what is the name of component that renders it. So we see that it is release edit new app component. Great. So now let's find this component in the code. In GitLab, Vue.js components can be found under App, Assets, JavaScript folder. So let's try to find releases. Okay, so here we have releases. And we see that there are components, GraphQL and stores folder, and some other files. From GraphQL name, we can understand that requests from this page are handled by GraphQL API endpoint. But now let's go to components and try to find a file where this component is defined. So let's find it folder, release edit new app. Release edit new app. Okay, so it's defined in app edit new.view. Let's go and open it. If you scroll down, here we see a template where we build in HTML for this form, and at the bottom of it we have GL button component that renders our submit button. Here we see that the type is submit. And now let's find which method handles this form submission. Let's find a form HTML tag in here, and we see that there is submit form method. So let's see what it does. So it's defined in this component, and we see that when form submission is not disabled, what we do is we save release and then we put create release notification. Okay, now let's see what we do to save this release. This method is not defined within this file, so let's go to definition of this method. It took us to actions file, which we see is under releases, stores, modules, edit new folder. Okay, so let's see what we do in here. We commit request save release, and then we dispatch update release or create release, depending whether this release is existing or not. Since we're looking at the create release right now, so let's find where this function is. So it's in the same file, and let's see what we do in here. So we call mutate on this GraphQL client, and the mutation that is responsible for handling this is create release mutation. So let's try and find this mutation. It is under GraphQL, and we have here mutations folder. Let's see create release mutation .graphql, so it's the first one. Here we see that we call release create. Where can we find this release create another GraphQL mutation? All such mutations can be found under app and GraphQL folder. And here we have mutations. So let's try to find releases folder again. So here we have it, and we see that there are 4 files: base, create, delete, and update. So we need to find release create mutation. So let's go to create file, and here we have our release create GraphQL. We have a list of field and arguments, and at the bottom we see resolve method. So let's try and see what this method does. The first line, we find a project from using project path and assign it to project variable. Then we assign params variable and send project, current user, and params to this releases create service, then we call execute method, and the result of this execution we assign to a result variable. Okay, so looks like the logic that handles release creation is moved to this create service. And what is service or service object in Rails? These are used to extract business logic out of controllers or modules into a separate file. And each service should be responsible for doing only one thing. And it should have only one public method that others can use to run this service. So let's try to find a file where this service is created. So usually in Rails applications, services are under app and services folder. So here we have services folder. Let's try to find releases folder. Okay, here we have it, and we see a list of services in here, and we need to go to create service. Okay, so here we go. We see that we have one method which is called execute, and this is the only public method, or others we see that they are private ones. Now let's take a look what we do inside this execute method. So we return an error based on result of evaluation of these conditions. Then we find evidence pipeline using another service. Then we assign a tag. Then we return a tag unless this condition is true. And if you go down, we see that there is create release method where we send tag and evidence pipeline. So let's take a look at this method. We see that it's defined in the same service. So what we do here, we build a release, then we save this release, then we probably send notification somewhere that this release is created. And here on the next line we have execute hooks where we send release object and string with create word. Execute hooks, so this looks like it might be responsible for triggering hook when release is created. Let's try to see where this method is defined. So it's not here. If we scroll up, we see that our class is inherited from base service. So probably this method is defined in this class. So let's try and take a look. Let's search for execute hooks. And here we have it. So we accept release and action attributes where default value for action is create. And then we call execute hooks method on release object and pass this action to this method. Okay, so now let's see if we have the same method in use in the update service, because we know that webhook is triggered on create and update of release. So let's open update service and try to search for execute hooks, and we see that we run this method after release is updated, and we may notice that the action name here is different. It is update. Now let's go to the destroy service, and we see that we don't have this method in here. So probably this is the method that we need to put somewhere in this service in order to trigger webhook when release is deleted. But now we can validate whether this is the right thing to do. So we can try and, for example, remove this line, execute hooks, and test in the UI and see if our application will send a request to this webhook site. Let's just remove it. Let's save it. Let's go to our browser. Okay, now let's try to reload this page. Okay, so we did changes in the create service. So let's try to create release and see if requests will be sent to this site. Let's click new release, try to select tag, provide title, and let's hit create release button. Okay, so we see that release is created, but a request is not sent to this site. So looks like this is what we need to add to another service which is responsible for release deletion. Now let me switch to the branch where I have all the code changes and we will review them. Okay, so now I am on the branch with the changes. Let's go to UI and try to delete release and see if Webhook will be triggered. So we created this release test. Let's go and delete it. Let's click delete, confirm delete, and we see that we've got a request in this site. And also we can check that this is really a request triggered by release delete event. So here in the payload we can find this field action that we previously found that we send it to this execute hooks method, and the value of it is delete. If we try to create release, for example, let's call, hit create, and we see that we've got a request in here. And if we check this action field again, so we see that the value now is different. It is create. And now if we try to update it, update and save changes, let's review this request, and the action right now says update. Okay, so we got it to work. Let's review the merge request with the changes that I made. Here you can see that I updated destroy service for release, and when release is destroyed, I added execute hooks method where I sent a release object that was destroyed, and the name of the action in this service is delete. If we scroll down, we see that the next file I updated is in app views shared webhooks folder, which is called form. And what I updated here is the text which was previously saying that release is created or updated, and now it says created, updated, or deleted. So this text was rendered on the webhook configuration page. So if you go back to UI and go to webhooks, try to add new webhook, and here under releases event we now can see release is created, updated, or deleted. So this is where this label was updated. And every time you change the translation string in GitLab, you need to run a script to regenerate a translation file which is called gitlab.pod. So we can find it here. So we see that the script also updated this translation string. Okay, let's go back up. Okay, so the next file, you see that it is webhook events .md. It is under the doc file. What is this file? So anytime you add a new feature or update existing ones, you need to also take care of the documentation for this feature and update it accordingly. So in my case, we see that in the documentation, it was stated that release events are triggered when release is created or updated. So I need to add to this documentation also a note that when release is deleted, it will also trigger release events. So you see that I updated it. So it states created, updated, or deleted, and added one more value for the actions in the payload. And last but not least is our spec file. So spec files, which can be found under spec folder, in those files we add tests to cover our code. And this file is for destroy service.spec.rb. And here I added a test where I verify that this execute hooks method is called when we delete a release. So this is it for the changes, and if we go to review this merge request, we can see the description where I explained what this merge request does. Then I also added screenshots and screen recording so that the reviewer can understand what is the change. Also, I provided a list of steps that the reviewer or anyone else can follow in order to validate these changes in their local instance. After merge request got created, I received a comment from the danger bot. Danger bot can post you some messages or warnings related to your changes. In my case, there is just one message saying that since I updated documentation files, I will need to request review from technical writing team. Also, it helps you with the reviewers. Under reviewer roulette section, you can find a table where it suggests you reviewer for different categories. Here I have two categories, backend and frontend, and so I picked one reviewer from backend and one reviewer from frontend and assigned it to review this merge request. And this is how I solved this issue. Thanks for watching. I hope it will help you to start your contribution journey. To begin with, you can follow this contribute to GitLab page, and should you have any questions, please reach out to us on Discord. Thanks again and happy contributing!